recording's in progress. Let me hit that. And thank you, Teresa, for opening the meeting. Thank you, Ali, for the invitation. It's customary in where we come from to let you know that I have a home group. It's called the Design for Living Group in Neptune, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. I have a sponsor. His name is Bob B. from St. Paul, Minnesota. I sponsor a lot of men. And most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was on March 28, 1987. And extremely grateful for this life, extremely grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous and to be here tonight. I didn't know this was a recurring meeting until recently. And when you're not on social media, you don't know these things. So I'd rather be off social media, to be honest with you. Calvin, thank you so much. I listened to Calvin's fifth step. We could talk about that for 4 days right now. And you guys would be fascinated by what I heard. And I would love to share all that with you. And we'll save that for another meeting, for the sick and suffering meeting. That's what we'll save that one for. But again, just it's great to be here. And I did pick this topic of we relaxed and take it easy. We don't struggle. I love the idea of just picking out a phrase or a line or a word. And I'm sure, and I've listened, I think I've been on this meeting 3 times. My old sponsor spoke, I guess, in the beginning. Then 2 weeks ago, I was on when Sharon was on. I listened to Teresa last week, and here I am today. So, this topic of we relax, we take it easy, we don't struggle. I think, just letting you know that, as Calvin just let you know, that I have the honor and privilege of serving my area as the area delegate to the General Service Conference. That tells you right there that I have to do a lot of praying and a lot of meditating. So, and I try not to struggle with that. But I expect that many of us here tonight or have a very healthy morning practice. I believe many of us here today have a prayer ritual, maybe a meditation practice. Maybe we read some books. Maybe we read some inspirational books. Maybe we just read, whatever we need to read, the Bible even, or the big book. And I'm sure most of us have done that or do that still for probably many years, like myself. I'm sure many of you on this meeting right now have a healthy nighttime practice, a review practice, or an inventory practice when we retire at night. And I have for many, many, many years. I've been kind of programmed into reviewing my day, so I could see where I've fallen short. But I think the biggest thing that we don't talk about, or maybe I don't talk about, or maybe the biggest trap that I have is throughout my day, when I fall short, when I'm faced with those indecisions or those, or that aggravation or even doubt. How many times have I not turned to God throughout the day? So when I review my inventory or when I do my inventory at night, what I usually find out is that I'm always being driven by an old idea about something, right? And that old idea is usually about control or the delusion of control, or that I have to have the answer to everything. So when I look at this review and I look at my day, sometimes they just don't match up. So what's really important is that I want to talk about tonight is how I get driven by a lot of bold ideas about a lot of things in my life. And I think it's one of the things that we need to take a good look at. How many times have we asked a newcomer, are you willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol? And most times they look at us and their head, they shake their head like a bobblehead doll, but we never really explain what any length really looks like. Well, how many times in our literature does the book ask us, beg us, or try to, turn us towards laying aside our old ideas about what? Well, let's start with everything, right? Am I willing to lay aside the old ideas I have about my life, or the way I look at life, or the things that drive me in my life, or the things I think my life should look like when it comes to certain things like money and relationships and family and work and even AA? Can I see the conflicts that those things cause when it doesn't show up the way I think my life should show up? So am I able to relax and take it easy and stop struggling with these things? Or do I live under the delusion of control that I have to control everything and I'm back in the director's chair trying to run life as I suit it to get what I need? And I think my inventory always shows me that, by not being willing to live on terms other than my own, I become that guy, the agnostic guy. You know that guy, the guy that says, here, God, here's the drink problem. I'm going to handle the rest of my life. And I think that's the most cunning, baffling, and powerful thing about this thing. And why I need to pray and why I need to turn to God constantly is because I've become closed-minded throughout my day, where I haven't turned to God, and I think I could run the show myself. And what prayer does, it opens my mind to a different perspective, because at many times throughout my day, I'm pretty narrow-minded and closed-minded. So, the third step really says to me, we trust this infinite God rather than our finite selves. And when I think that I have all the answers, and when I think I have control over certain things in my life, what I'm really doing is playing God. And coming out of that third step, I know one thing about playing God, and it's the second shortest line in our literature. It doesn't work. But what's more baffling to me is this. I know that. On an intellectual level, I know that. And I still fall for the trap of delusion of thinking that I could run life according to Jimmy, that I could still control the things in my life. And being driven by these old ideas about a lot of different things, a lot of areas of my life, it just creates a lot of conflict in my life. So the reading really is about, how do I go through my day? How do I show up? On Awakening, like I said, we all pray, we all meditate, we all read spiritual literature. But what goes on at the office? What goes on with my family? What goes on throughout the day when I don't turn to God and I get back in that driver's seat? One of the things that, as I thought about this talk and thought about what I wanted to talk about is, it's amazing how blind I've been. 34 years sober, still have contempt, pride, and investigation. God has shown up from day one and even before day one, that there's been a God in my life all the time. And sometimes I don't think the power of God's going to work in my life. From an early age, a little bit about not even a little bit about my story, I have parents and teachers who give me morals, who give me values, who try to give me education, who try to give me everything good in life, But like many of us, I have that moment. And I think we all have that moment where life becomes different for all of us. And that moment for me, looking back now, is back in almost 5th grade, 6th grade. My parents wanted the best for me. But what my parents did was they took me out of a public school system that I felt very comfortable. They put me into a Catholic school with a lot of strangers and all these things like nuns and priests and Catholicism and all these things. And from an early age, I felt like my parents were punishing me for doing that. I couldn't see the truth about what my parents were really doing. That they were trying to give me something good in life, that were trying to help me to succeed in life, to give me education, to give me a step up on, a lot of people that were in my neighborhood. Because I come from this blue collar neighborhood, I come from this neighborhood where the only requirement for membership is 5 more kids. I come from a neighborhood of hard drinking, union workers. Everyone's a cop, everyone's a fireman, everyone is, a truck driver, everyone is a tough guy. I'm from the streets. And all my parents wanted me, the best for me was to give me a shot, to give me a chance. But I couldn't see it that way. And that moment, like many of us, when we have that moment where we start to look at life differently. And by the time I'm 12 years old, 13 years old, I think I know what the answer to my problems are. It's called King Alcohol. And I take that first drink under the delusion that drinking's going to be my problem solver, that drinking's going to make me feel better. Drinking's going to answer all the problems I have in my life. And I'm not sure how many problems I have in my life at 13 years old, but it seemed like there was a ton. Feelings of insecurity, feelings of fear, the violence that went on in my house, the fear of my father, all these things just internalized until I found Colt 45 and Blackberry brandy. And as my old sponsor would say all the time, what I didn't realize is I stepped on a road that goes straight to hell. And within 16 years, I'm living homeless on the streets of New Jersey. Nowhere to go. Riddled by shame, guilt, and remorse of the things I've done, the people I've hurt with my behavior and my drinking. walking out of a marriage, walking out of college, walking out of all the things that were laid at my feet to be successful in life. And after 2 years, and after 19 months on the street, again, God shows up. I don't see it as God showing up, but I'm living on the streets and I'm stealing, I'm panhandling, I'm robbing people. I'm doing whatever I need to do to get whatever I need to get. And I walk in a bar to rob a guy one day or panhandle or whatever would come first. I walk in a bar one day and I meet an old gentleman who says to me, Jimmy, you need to go to Newark Airport. They're hiring guys like you. And what happens is I wound up going to Newark Airport. And what I didn't realize that God had a plan for me on that day. Because as I walked into that airport, 29 years old, broken, sick, desperate. I couldn't even put the words to that, how I felt on that day, until I landed in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I read Bill's story. And when I read Bill's first step experience of no words could tell the loneliness and despair I felt in that bit of morass of self-pity, quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I've met my match. I've been overwhelmed. Alcohol is my master. And in that moment, looking back, I know that alcohol was my master. And what happened to me is God put a man in my life, a complete stranger in the middle of Newark Airport. And this gentleman sat next to me and asked me a question that seems pretty simple. What's your problem? And for whatever reason, I spit up, well, I know the reason today, but I spit up my life story on this gentleman in 10 minutes. And he looked at me and said, I have the answer for you. And he took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was on March 28, 1987. And I haven't had the obsession or the thought of picking up a drink again. I get a God moment. And I can give you God moments left and right throughout my sobriety. But when I look back, how God has used me, even without my permission. I remember when I was 18 months sober, I was working a midnight shift. I'm back with my wife. I'm back with the kids. I got a house. I got a job. Everything looks good. And I walk into my parents' home and I find my father dead on the floor. And I'm programmed pretty good. So I call my sponsor immediately and I say, what do I do? He says, call 911 and let's go to prayer. Let's pray for your father. Let's pray for your mom. Let's pray for what's going on right now. And I remember praying. And as I stopped praying, the police showed up. And the first officer walked into the house and he started to take the information on what was going on. And he looked at me and he said, hey, I don't see you on the streets anymore. Matter of fact, didn't I arrest you once? And I said, yeah, I think you arrested me a few times, more than once. He goes, I don't see you drinking or walking the streets anymore. And I said, yeah, I don't do that anymore. He goes, matter of fact, I don't even see you in the bars anymore. And I said, yeah, I don't do that no more. And he asked me, how do I do that? And I said, I go to this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, and apparently it works. I haven't had a drink in 18 months. And I'll show you the power of God, because what did happen in the next 5 to 10 minutes is I wound up 12-stepping this cop over my dead father's body. And I'm proud to say today that Brian S. has 32 years of sobriety from that moment that we had that talk. And I don't say that for a pat on the back. I'm just saying that God shows up when God shows up. And God will always, show up without my permission, right? And I'd like to tell you that I got on this rocket ship called spirituality, and I had a prayer life, and I had a meditation life, and I did all the things that the book was suggested I do, but that's not my story. My story is that I grow and I hit a wall, I grow and I hit a wall, and I grow and I hit a wall. And at 5 years of sobriety, I really hit a wall. And why I hit a wall was because I was living under the delusion that maybe some of you guys might be living. I thought that abstinence was the solution to my spiritual problem. And there was no prayer life, there was no meditation life, there was no inventory life. I just didn't drink and went to meetings. And though that's a good suggestion, what I didn't know is that's not going to solve my alcoholism. And after a talk in a town in North Jersey, some guy came up to me in front of me by telling me that I was pretty much well screwed. And I wanted to start a fight in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But what happened was I took a step back and looked at this gentleman and I said, you're right, I need help. And the next day, on a summer day in 1992, I found myself in a red room apartment with this guy named Bill Grace. And he's giving me this spiritual test that maybe some of you guys have gotten. First question he asked me was, how long can you hold your breath? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? He asked me what made me alcoholic, and I had no clue. I said, I drink too much. I had no idea about, the physical allergy. I had no idea about the mental obsession. I certainly had no idea about this thing deep down inside of me. later to be known as a soul sickness, as the old timers would say all the time, that alcoholism is a soul sickness caused by a separation from God and a disconnect from each other. No wonder why I drank in isolation and loneliness, said the wrote. No wonder why some of us, when we come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, sit in that back row, we don't raise our hands, we don't let anyone know, and then we walk out and say AA doesn't work. But AA works just fine. And as I sat there and he started to ask me a few questions, he asked me, what does my relationship with God look like? Well, I believe in God, but what does God have to do with any of this? But then he asked me a question that maybe most of you guys are not going to believe, but this is the way it was in New Jersey, or in my neighborhood in 1980s. He asked me where my big book was. And I looked at him and I said, what's a big book? 5 years sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. A+ in fellowship. Dying of something I don't even know I'm dying from. It's called untreated alcoholism. And what Bill started to do that day was paint a picture to God, a road to God. Talked about the 2 goals of Alcoholics Anonymous, goals I believe to this moment. First goal is that we don't pick up the first drink no matter what. But the second goal is to enter the world of the Spirit and to live in the sunlight of the Spirit, where there's complete freedom, where we do stop struggling, where we experience all these promises that the book talks about, where we stop fighting anything or anyone, where we get placed in a place of neutrality, safe and protected, where the drink problem has been removed, that place, where the bondage of self doesn't exist, where there's a real need for service and helping others, that place. But in order to get out to that sunlight of the Spirit, I'm going to have to go through the darkness of my life, like many of us do, where we have to uncover, discover, and discard the things in our lives that are blocking us from God. See, it's hard to have a prayer life and an inventory life and a meditation life with God when I'm still trying to run the show. So my struggles and why I can't take it easy and why I can't relax is because I have to, or I demand answers. I want my life to look a certain way. And when that doesn't happen, it's conflict, it's insecurity, it's all the things, fear, self-centered fear, which just opens the door for all my other character defects. So here I am, I'm sitting with this guy, Bill, and he starts to visualize what this really looks like. Going through that hallway of life, out to the door, out into the sunlight of the Spirit. I read it all the time because I think it's one of the greatest readings we have, but that comes out of Daily Reflections. And on May 1st, it says, it's the side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at that dark side in order to heal my heart and my mind, because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into darkness to find the light and walk into fear to find the peace. The way the old timers used to say that in my neighborhood was like this. Alcoholics Anonymous is like a big bonfire, and most people are walking around the bonfire. But if you really want to change, if you really want to let go, if you really want to get through the fears of your life, you have to walk through that fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. And as I started to do that and go through these steps and started to uncover, discover, and discard the things in my life that were blocking me from God and blocking me from you, I found out about a word that I thought meant weakness, but it was really strength in disguise. It's called vulnerability. Opening my life to another man and sharing my life with another man. And I like to tell you that, from that moment on, I've been a spiritual giant in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, but that's not my truth. I've rested on my laurels more than enough that I like to tell you. And every time that I rested on my laurels, I was headed for trouble, and though I couldn't see it. And at 10 years of sobriety, I blow up my life. And at 13 years of sobriety, I almost drank. And why I almost drank was because I wasn't seeking God in anything in my life. I was seeking Jimmy's will in everything in my life. And I'm not here to talk about my whole story, but that's what happened at 13 years of sobriety, where I found myself in a bar ordering a drink because the pain was so great. I understand what Dr. Bob was talking about when he said he was stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I didn't want to take that drink, but boy, did I need that drink to kill the pain. And when I ordered that drink and I looked at that drink in the bar, the devil and the angel popped out. Drink it, don't drink it, drink it, don't drink it. I didn't want to take that drink, but man, I wanted that drink so bad. But then a hand went around that drink, and here goes God showing up again, just when I didn't want him to. And when that bartender pulled back that drink and I looked up and I looked at the bartender, what I realized was the bartender's a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said to me, what are you doing here? Apparently throwing my life away. And what happened was, in the next 2 weeks, I went to a meeting and I met a gentleman who became my sponsor for the next 17 years. And he was doing a workshop. And we started to go through the steps, and we started to a prayer life, and we started to do an inventory life immediately before I even started to get deeper into the steps. Many of you know him. I know some of you know, I know many of you know him, Peter M. And Peter became my sponsor. And again, this isn't about him, but what he did for me was he started to make me look at things that I never looked at before in my life in sobriety, these old ideas. And I shared this exercise that I did with him because I think it's one of the most powerful things I've ever done in my life, where I started to look at these old ideas that were running my life. He asked me to look at 5 areas of my life, and he said to me, I want you to look at these 5 areas: money, relationships, work, family, and Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want you to tell me what the old ideas that are driving you in each of those areas. And start with the phrase, real men. Real men. Real men are strong. Real men don't lie. Real men, all these things that were put in my brain or put in my mind by my parents, by my teachers, by my family, these ideas, these emotions, these attitudes. And whenever these ideas didn't show up the way I thought they should show up, it created all the conflict in my life. So I think my life should look like this when it comes to money. I think my life should look like this when it comes to work and relationships and my family. And the minute that it doesn't show up the way I think it should show up, it creates the struggles in my life. It creates the conflicts in my life. It brings me back into the darkness of my life. See, I'm not a free man when I'm trying to control those areas of my life. And my agnosticism demands that I try to control those things. What I always forget, and I always forget, is this: that lack of power is my dilemma. So this idea of prayer and meditation, of turning towards God throughout my day, and to relax and take it easy, and to stop struggling with the things, to see the truth about what's really going on in my life on a daily basis, and to inventory that life. None of us adhere to these principles, as we read so many times in How It Works. As my sponsor today likes to say, we're all human beings on a spiritual walk. We're all going to fall short throughout our day. Get back on the bike. Get back on the bike. And what I mean by that is this: every morning when I pray and meditate, I set the goal. And what's the goal? For many years, I've used the 4 absolutes from the Oxford group of purity, honesty, unselfishness, and love. That's what I'm going to aim for today. And I walk out my door on a daily basis to do whatever I need to do. And every day I fall off the bike. In trying to achieve those goals, I make mistakes like all of us. But you see, just like we teach our kids how to ride a bike, when I fall off the bike, I don't pick up the bike and say it doesn't work and throw it into the dumpster. The bike works just fine. The idea here in Alcoholics Anonymous is to get back on the bike, and to continue to pedal, and to continue to seek God in all things in my life, and to seek all things and all ways of how I can get closer to God, and to get down to the causes and conditions of the obstacles in my path. So we all have adversity in our life. We all go through things. And when I read this little paragraph about relax, take it easy, we stop struggling, the reason why I can't do that again is because of the adversities of life, that my life should not look like it is right now. And just to give you an example, like many of us, I've been through divorce, which was a very difficult thing. I've been through a horrific accident, December 6, 1999. I haven't worked since that day. I've had 12 back operations. I've had 3 knee replacements. I've had 41 operations since 2001. I like to say that I'm 5'8", but after they put all the metal in me, I'm 6'4" now. It's a miracle how it happened, but here I am. But adversities and injuries, and asking God, why God? Why God? Why me, God? Well, why not me? So what I need to do, and what I've learned to do, is challenge some of these old ideas, that my life should look a certain way, and to challenge these belief systems that a lot of us are walking around with. On page 86, it says, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision concerning my health, concerning my kids, concerning my family, concerning my employment, concerning my AA business meeting, concerning whatever it is. I may face indecision. We might not be able to determine which course to take. Fork in the road. Spiritual solutions or Jimmy's will. That's my two alternatives. Keep living the way you're living or accept spiritual help. That's not only here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Many times that's throughout my day, in my life. Here we ask God for inspiration. Inspiration is nothing more than wisdom, nothing more than enthusiasm. God, help me to be enthusiastic about what's that task right now. Or an intuitive thought, where we automatically know what to do, where we tap into that inner resource that's deep down in every man, woman, and child, that God is going to take me to this place where I'm supposed to be. We relax and take it easy. The old idea is that I have to have the answer to everything. No, you don't. No, you don't. Back on the last step, it tells me sanity has returned. The ability to see truth about circumstances in my life, the ability to see truth about what's going on in my life, the ability to see the truth that I'm not insane when it comes to my life is really clear right now. 2020 vision. And I start to get to use my thinking rather than my thinking using me. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. So we don't struggle. The paradox of Alcoholics Anonymous, we surrender to win, right? I put down my weapon. And our success is through weakness, not strength. It's through surrendering to God's power and not living on my power. You know, I live by the ocean here, and, you know, we have these things called riptides. I don't know if anyone's familiar. I know a bunch of you on here know what a riptide is, but a riptide is something, a current of water that comes underneath the ocean floor and comes up and grabs you, and it sucks you in like a vacuum. Now, if you're not familiar with that, you're going to struggle. But what this prayer and what this is really like is being stuck in a riptide sometimes, because I demand to know. I demand to be my way. I demand to have control over the situation. I demand to have my will done. And all that's happening when I do that is being sucked into this funnel of water. But see, it's really easy to get out of a riptide if you know. All you have to do is swim, you know, parallel with the ocean. Parallel with the beach. And you'll be out of that thing in 2 seconds. Stop struggling. Get out of the water. And you're safe and protected. See, a lot of people have drowned. A lot of people have died in the waters around here because they don't know how to get out of the riptide. And sometimes life feels like that riptide, where I'm being sucked in, where I'm being pulled, where I'm doing things that I really am not proud of doing. But like it says, we're often surprised how the right comes after we try this for a while. So this idea of practice, of making it a practice every day to bring God's will into all my activities. One of the considerations that I was asked once is this. When I look at people, situations in my life, do I look at those things through the lens of a character defect, or do I look at them through the eyes of God? How many things in my life have I looked through with fear? How many situations have I looked, even to this day, through the lens of anger, or jealousy, or envy, or selfishness? Or do I really, truly look through the eyes of God? That's really an important thing that I need to carry throughout my day. That's one way of being able to relax and take it easy and not struggle. By knowing that if I look at these through the eyes of God, to do what the third step's asking me to do to help God's kids, then for whatever reason, or more than that reason, I know that I'm not going to struggle. So as I go through my day, I need to consider this. How can I best serve thee? What used to be a hunch or an occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. So it's really important that I discuss these things with a sponsor. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it's not probable we're not going to be inspired at all times. And it's dangerous to think that I'm going to be inspired at all times. And that's why I need a sponsor to go over these things. As it says, we don't go into spiritual matters alone. And the arrogance to think that because I'm 34 years sober, when there's a lot of people sober a lot longer than me, and just because I think I've had conscious contact with God, can you hear the ego in that I don't need God, that I can really do what I think I know the answer to everything? But nevertheless, we find that our thinking mind, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. How do I handle situations that still baffle me? How do I handle situations, life situations, and relax and take it easy and don't struggle? 6 months to today, my mom died. 6 months to today, I went through something that I can only look back now and tell you, it's unbelievable how grateful I am for having what I walked through with my mother. Many of you guys know, and my friends that are on this call right now, my mom had late stage dementia, and I became the parent of my parent. It was brutal. It was very difficult to deal with, and it was really hard to relax and take it easy. And I struggled a lot with my emotions. I struggled a lot with my feelings. I struggled a lot with just dealing with a 94-year-old woman who lost her mind, especially knowing that she was such an intellect. And then with that, she wound up getting COVID in her assisted living place. At the time, I just got my knee replaced, and I was coming to physical therapy, and I got a phone call that my mother was transitioning. She was going to die any minute. And I'm the only sibling that's around in New Jersey. Everyone else is around the country. And I'll never forget that day till the day I died, because what happened was I showed up at that assisted living and I said that prayer. God, please help me with this. Please take away this pain and let me walk in there and just be a son to my mother. And I remember they gave me a COVID test. They put me in all the PPE stuff and blah, blah, blah. And when I walked in, the hospice nurse said, Jimmy, she can't open her eyes and she can't open her mouth, but she can hear you. And so when I walked in there, I said, hi, Mom. I could see her chest rapidly move up and down, knowing that I was in there. I could look back now, this is a God moment. That God placed me there with her, the black sheep of the family, the son that she had to bail out more than I could even count, the son that was really, was a big problem in her life. But here I am with my mother. And all I could think about is you guys, members of Alcoholics Anonymous, who have shared from a million podiums and a million church basements, and just how you walk through things with dignity and how you walk through things with God's help, holding God's hand through probably one of the most difficult things you've ever done, whether it's a death of a loved one, death of a child, whatever the situation is. I've listened for years of how you guys walk through with dignity. And I had my moment. And when I talked to my mother, I told her I loved her, and I told her that it's okay to go home to Dad. It was so powerful. To this day, I'm not sure if I grieved it or if I'm even understanding the power of what went on in that moment, that day, that hour that I sat with my mother before she died. And when I walked out of there, she died an hour later. Sharon 2 weeks ago talked about the pendulum. Many of us come into Alcoholics Anonymous on a pendulum of, one day I love life, next day I hate life, one day I love her, next day I hate her. And many of us feel that way when we walk in. We're all over the place emotionally. But what prayer and meditation, with the 12 steps, and what sponsorship has done for me, has brought me to that place where that pendulum doesn't swing so broad. Has brought me to that place of being what Bill Wilson talks about, being right-sized. And see, that's the gift. That's the gift of getting to that place. Because in that little place with a little wiggle, because that's life, we find something called emotional sobriety. Bill Wilson in his writings talks about emotional sobriety, about that, that I'm not attached to a person or a place or a situation to produce my happiness, that God has given me everything I need. I remember walking out of that assisted living place, knowing that God had brought me to a place where I was getting everything I needed. A relationship with him, a relationship with my mom. The pendulum stopped swinging. And what I started to understand, that prayer is about one thing and one thing only. It's about emptying the mind and filling the heart. Emptying the mind and filling the heart. That's why we continue to go to God. Empty my mind and fill my heart. I don't have control. It's a delusion that I have control. If anything I've learned through 34 years is that I'm powerless over drinking, drugs, and control. And when I think I have power, I can't let go. I can't let go, and I can't let go absolutely. And I can't let go and let God because of something that always shows up. It's one of the biggest things that we all face. And it's one word. It's called pride. And my pride is the essence of my self-centeredness. And my pride is the thing that will justify every character defect in my life. And pride will always step in when I'm in spiritual stagnation. So my pride opens up the door for all my character defects. But by turning to God on a consistent basis and emptying my mind and filling my heart with his grace, I get to walk through difficult things just like you guys have walked through difficult things. And more importantly, prayer is about the willingness to allow God to change me. I don't have the power to change me. Lack of power is my dilemma, but with power, no dilemma. I allow God to change me by being open to this power, by being willing to set aside my old ideas about what? Everything. And to the best of my ability, get on the bike of life and ask God throughout my day, when I'm faced with indecision, when I'm faced with aggravation, when I'm faced with doubt, when I'm faced with anything that's uncomfortable, to please take this away. To show me the way of your will, Lord. And the most important thing is to carry that out. It's a plan of action here. It's not a plan of thinking, it's a plan of action. And when you think of a drink, reach for a drunk. That's one thing I've always been told. When you think of a drink, reach for a drunk. Because that's what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I could tell you a whole bunch of stuff about the General Service Conference, the structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, the traditions, the steps, you name it. I could tell you about a lot of things in Alcoholics Anonymous. But if we take a big funnel out and we put everything in AA through the funnel, when it comes out of that bottom, with that little hose at the bottom, it comes down to one thing: one drunk talking to another. It's the single greatest therapy we have. And in doing so, I get closer to God. And in doing so, I get the opportunity to help God's kids. And as the third step said, when I get out of the director's chair and I help God's kids, God will take care of me. And that's probably the great news I can share tonight, that God will take care of you when you get out of the director's chair. So I guess I'm at my end of my 40 minutes, but I feel blessed today. I feel blessed that, the bondage of self can be temporarily removed by my willingness to do things differently. And that my surrender will always depend upon my actions and not my thoughts. That this is a plan of action, not a plan of thinking. So for that, I'm extremely grateful. Thank you, Calvin, Ali. That's all I got. Thank you.